What's going on? It's Jason Heath, and if you've ever struggled with getting smooth, connected playing on your bass extension, this video is for you. Today I'm going to share the techniques that will hopefully transform the way you approach this piece of gear on your bass and lead to smoother playing. And before you put in the comments, just go buy a 5-string bass. Yes, I know, done a whole video about that. Check that out, it's linked in the description below. But here in the United States and a lot of other countries, the extension has really become the standard, particularly for orchestral playing. Getting a handle on this and understanding how to play a little bit more elegantly and legato and connected and not tearing your hair out and missing notes and playing the wrong notes, it's a very helpful skill set in today's world. First of all, let's understand the challenges that this thing poses. First of all, the string length changes as you open these gates. So half position is already pretty much the maximum extension for most bass players' hands, yet we have to somehow play, I don't even know what we call this, like zero position, negative a half, negative first and a half. I mean, my goodness, I can feel the strain right there. So some sort of pivoting technique or scissoring your fingers a little bit this way rather than trying to open this way can be helpful, but it is a compromise to try to be comfortable down here. And luckily, we're not always down here all the time, but we're down here a lot in orchestral music in particular. So just getting comfortable with the technique that works for your hand and your bass is very important. I have dug into extensions quite a bit on this channel. In fact, one of the first videos that I ever really tried seriously at was a video on extensions. I just got a new camera, was really exploring different angles, so it's nothing but my head for that video, but I will link up to that in the description below if you want to check it out. And that video talks about the different styles of extension, and it has evolved over the years, and it's probably a bit different in every country. Back when I was starting college, when you looked at a professional symphony orchestra, you would, here in the United States, you would see what are called Stenholm extensions. And they're kind of like bass clarinet keys. They have these closers that come down over each individual note. And in some ways, those are awesome because they don't make you go back and find notes on the scroll. And that's part of the challenge, is trying to play this thing elegantly or smoothly or with more legato and grace. That solves a lot of problems, but it presents some problems that probably wind players struggle with too, namely that you have these keys that you have to play, and that when you open it up to go to the low notes, there's almost always an audible click. So you have to figure out when to open the extension, when to close the extension, and they are highly prone to rattling. And I think anybody who's had one of these for any duration of time has felt that pain of the extension rattle. It can be super brutal. Over time, we've started to, and again, here in the United States, we've started to see more of the gated extensions, or the capos, or however you want to describe those, the closers over each individual note. And now when I look at a professional bass section, here in the United States at least, just about every bass has one of these closers, like I have. Now, my extension, because I just gotta be that way, it goes down to a low B. So that's a whole lot of fun to be able to go down, totally unnecessary, although there are a lot of fun Bs in orchestral music, and especially Bs that like work really well when you drop down an octave. So if you feel like spending the extra bucks and you don't mind it poking over your scroll a little bit, the low B can be an awful lot of fun. Also, hello, awkward. The bass is not designed to be played here, and if you have those hat pin tuning pegs that are really cool looking, that can be like whack. You can get all sorts of crazy bruises. And even these Sloan tuners on my jack stat, which are a lot of fun to play, as is this bass in general. I've done a whole video about it. You can find yourself getting knocked on the edges or the edges of the extension, and if you've got one of those extensions with a lot of metal, it's just prime for bruising or chipping your nails or getting your finger sort of jammed up down there.
This video is brought to you by Upton Bass, and Upton has been for years putting out some very cool content, but I was captivated by this video that Gary Upton did recently with Blake Hinson of the New York Philharmonic. It's on the concept of honing your bass, really just optimizing your bass for tone, for playability. Definitely check that out. We've got a link to it in the description below, and thank you, Upton, so much for sponsoring this video.
Proper technique and quote-unquote proper, there's no real proper technique for this. It's just something that's evolving over time as they become more popular. One thing I would highly recommend, especially if you're playing a lot down here, is doing what I'm doing and sitting. And I've done videos about sitting versus standing and stools and all that good stuff. I'll put a playlist together for you to check out. Short TLDR is I generally practice standing and play solo standing, but I sit for playing in the orchestra and when I'm getting ready to play in the orchestra. And these days I've been sitting for the YouTube videos just so that the camera can stay locked onto me. But there are definite advantages to both sitting and standing. However, sitting gives you a tremendous advantage for playing on the extension. The balance problems that having the bow and the bass and navigating that just your normal bass challenges for balancing the bass are magnified when you have to play up here. And without a stool, it's really tricky to get the arm weight in. And that's one of the critical components for playing comfortably and legato and in an organized way on the extension is just making sure you have enough arm weight into the bass. I don't want to just try to close with my finger. I want to really feel that arm weight sink in. And then the big question is like, what do you do with your thumb back here? And the challenge, of course, is everybody's scroll is going to be a little bit different. And I have come up with this particular bass and this particular extension, which is, by the way, a low B extension, very nerdy. I can go all the way down there. I mean, come on. For the 0 position, with my first finger on E, I take my thumb and I put it on the back of the scroll right here. And again, your mileage may vary depending on how your bass looks, but my thumb sits here and that's very comfortable. It's the exact same thing when I go down to the -1/2 position. So that would be with first finger on E flat. I still keep my thumb here. And then by the time I get to D, with my first finger on D, we'll call it -1st position, very wide position, by the way, I actually take my thumb and I hook it kind of on the back of this Sloan tuning machine. Now, that may or may not work depending on your bass. And then if I do have to play down in, we'll call it -1.5 position, I guess, I will have my thumb actually on the back of the extension board. This is very comfortable. This is not so awesome. These two are fairly comfortable.
Also, there's this whole system of notation that we bass players have kind of informally developed over the years for marking extensions. And it's a beautiful thing when you get an orchestral part and you see that someone has taken the work to put in what's coming. Generally these days I see X and then the name of the note that's needed. So like X E flat or XD or something like that. And you can also have multiple notes that you need to sort of prep, and that's part of being graceful with the extension. So you'll see like X, D, comma, E. That means you have the D closer closed, you have the E closer closed, but the E flat is open. That's because there's a low D coming up, but it's better to have the E for the time being.
But the real magic with getting comfortable playing on an extension, developing facility, developing legato, developing some grace if possible, is using these groovy gates. And these extensions have evolved over time. This has kind of coalesced into the extension you see on most basses, and it eliminates the need to always pop down here. So you've just got to figure out ahead of time what is going to be down and what's not down. Now, for just about every bass, trying to open them on the go, it can be done, but it will probably not open the gates all the way. You may get some buzzing. So I really try to look ahead in the music, and if I'm not sure what the low notes are, the safe thing to do is just have C open. And once you get a handle on what notes are low and what needs to be closed and not closed, you write it in your part and you're good to go. My wife is a harpist and they have to prepare their pedals in a very similar fashion. So when when you're sight reading and there are low notes, you might want to just have C open, or maybe just C and E. That way you're covered with the E, you see a low note, you pop that open and you go down. Also, getting comfortable navigating this without looking at it is helpful. If at all possible, I do look and verify, because I've many, many times thought I had my E open and I come in, the basses come in, I get... And I've had so many times, countless times, this big, low, fortissimo E natural coming, and I forgot that this is open, and I land on that E flat when I should be on that. Not pretty. So making sure that you verify, a little glance up here can be quite helpful. And I can do this with feel, but I'm still just so paranoid about playing the wrong note. If you see me at a concert, you'll see me constantly looking back. By the way, that's another reason I don't like standing and playing the extension. I find this very challenging for balance. I've never fallen over while opening or closing the extension gates, but I've come close. And one more little quirky thing, and we could probably make an hour-long video about just the little quirks of extensions, but you will find two different types of ways that these closers work. One is that when you move the closer across, it just comes and like closes the string nice and clean. That's what this extension, made by Chris Threlkeld, by the way, great bass maker out of Iowa City. And this works great. I do not have to futz around with the string. I can just close that and it will close. A lot of extensions require that you push the string down before you close. Now, once you learn how to do that, it's not that big a deal, but if you're not used to it, and I was borrowing a bass recently that I needed to play on the extension and I needed to do that technique, it can be very freaky at first. So if you do have the kind of extension, and they're both good extensions, reputable extension makers make both kinds, but if you do have the one that requires the string to be held down a little bit, you just need to develop the technique of like taking a finger that's not closing the closer and closing that. So practical exercises for developing this. Well, it's just like any other skill, and just practicing opening and closing these things. And also learning how to baby the extension notes a little bit. The bass was not really designed to have the string vibrate from this node, and so if you're not careful, even the best setup extension, you can get a little bit of buzzing. So just making sure that you aim with the bow a little closer to the A string side of things. That will help. If you play too much toward the C bout, the string will vibrate like into the fingerboard, causing it to buzz. And even if it's absolutely perfectly set up, which these things do require some maintenance, that might happen. So just being a little bit maybe closer to the bridge, certainly closer to the A string side, and maybe not bearing down too hard on the string. Maybe thinking about a little bit more back and forth, fat string kind of motion, and then just being close to the adjacent string. That can help to tame the beast. You might even want to try pushing down the A string so you can get the A string a little bit lower, and that'll get the angle even a little bit more parallel to the fingerboard. And then it's just taking the scariness out of it, desensitizing yourself to it. Just kind of like playing in thumb position makes you more confident playing in thumb position. Playing on the extension has the exact same effect. So I make sure that whatever scale I'm doing that week, I start on the extension note if it goes down there. So if I'm doing D major, and maybe practicing different fingers. Or if we're doing D flat, besides scales and just practicing with the gates, a lot of it, frankly, is experience and getting used to doing it in the moment. You will get better and more confident with time. And just realize this is not the most elegant part of the bass to play. I love practicing Baroque bass lines. They go down kind of arbitrarily sometimes. to these low notes, and that's a great way to get comfortable. Lucas Drew's amazing collection of Baroque bass lines, which we sell in our sheet music store, is a great resource for getting started with that. And you can take some fantastically tricky passages like the storm scene from Beethoven's Sixth Symphony, which is on the extension and flabbergastingly difficult. Take it at like 20% tempo. It's a great way to work it up. I think I've gotten it to almost half tempo before I have to start faking it, which I think is what I've always done when I've actually tried to do it. That is a great use case for a 5-string for sure. But taking harder passages like that and working them up just like any other challenging piece of music can be great for developing facility. And final tip is just to think about this really as an extension of your bass. Shifting drills are a great way to develop that feeling, and just making sure that you are able to keep the weight in if necessary. There aren't a whole lot of legato shifts we do down to the extension, but it sometimes happens, and just making sure that even though it is a tacked on piece of wood to your bass, that if you can make this feel like part of your instrument and like an extension of your instrument, a natural extension to your instrument, that will do wonders for developing facility and comfort on the extension. If you found this helpful, check out the playlist I've got linked up with other extension content. I've done a weirdly large amount of extension content over the years. I hope you enjoyed it. Drop a comment if you have some thoughts to share, like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.